Fireside Tales with Wolfgang. Episode 27. Originally broadcast on GWC Productions YouTube channel, CAPS Media Television Channel 6, KPPQ LP Ventura at 104.1 FM, and on the KPPQ Podcast Network. Greetings and salutations. I'm Hunter Ackerman, here to read some classic literature for you and my beastly feline companion Wolfgang. So Wolfus, what do you want to hear? And welcome to the conclusion on Fireside Tales with Wolfgang of Minions of the Moon. I think Yoda would have said that better. Let me try that again. Greetings and salutations. Welcome to Fireside Tales with Wolfgang. This is the conclusion of Minions on the Moon. God damn it. It's Minions of the Moon, isn't it? It's not on the moon. Shit. Okay, well, stop talking. I'm still recording. Okay. Welcome. And this is the conclusion of Minions of the Moon. I think I got all the words right. Okay. Kitz was at the door, still with his mug of brandy in his hand. Guy seized him by the ear and took him out with him into the fresh air, where the white frost was, and where the white moon was shining now. Look, the soldiers are after us, and they know where we are, Kitz. Pitch that stuff away. No, not if I... No, sir. And get the horses ready. Quick. I'll be with you in a moment. He walked along the garden path in front of the big old farm, swung wide the farm gates and propped them open. Then he went down on all fours and put his ear to the frost-bound country road and listened. Yeah, he added. 2 miles away and coming on sharp. Why not let them come? What does it matter how soon? He strode back, however, with quick steps. 5 minutes afterward, he was at the door of the farm parlor again, with his cloak over his shoulder and his riding whip in his hand. Boys, redcoats are upon us, he shouted. Each man to his horse. We're betrayed then. We won't go and leave all the good things in this house, cried Stango. Why, it's like the Bank of England upstairs, and I have the keys. Stango, I shall certainly put a bullet through your head if you attempt to do anything more save to thank our worthy host for his hospitality and give him back his keys. Do you hear? He thundered forth. Will you hang us all, you fool, by your delay? The highwaymen were scurrying out of the room now, a few in too much haste to thank the givers of the feast, the others bowing and shaking hands in mock burlesque of their chief. Stango had thrown down his keys and run for it. Sorry we must leave you, Master Pemberthy, said the captain, but I certainly have the impression that a troop of horse soldiers is coming in this very direction. Pure fancy, probably, but one cannot risk anything in these hard times. Your purse, sir, which I took this afternoon, I shall not require it. Buy Mistress Sophie a wedding with it. Good night. He bowed low, but he did not smile till he met Sophie's frightened looks. Then he bowed still lower, hat in hand, and said good night with a funny break in his voice and a longing look in his dark eyes that Sophie did not readily forget. It was all like a dream after the highwaymen had put spurs to their horses and galloped away from Maythorpe Farm. It will be 15 years, come next wintertime, since the Minions of the Moon held their high carnival at the farm of Reuben Pemberthy. Save that the trees about the homestead are all full of rustling green leaves, and there is sunshine where white frost had lay, the farm looks very much the same. The great thatched roof has taken a darker tinge, and all the gold in it has turned to grey, and the walls are more weather-beaten than of yore, but it is the old farm still. Along the road comes a horseman at full speed, as though anxious to find a shelter before nightfall from the King's Highway in this direction is no safer than it used to be. People talk of Abershaw and Barrington and a man with 16 strings to his hat who are busy in this direction, but the days are long now, and it wants some hours before sundown when the traveller leaps from his horse and stands under the broad eaves of the porch where the creepers are growing luxuriantly and are full of fair white flowers. The traveller is a good horseman, though he is past the heyday of his youth. It is not for some 3 minutes afterward that his manservant, hot and powdered thick with dust, comes up on horseback after him and takes charge of his master's steed. The master is a man of 40 years or more, and looking somewhat older than his years, his hair being very grey. He stoops a little between the shoulders when off his guard, though he can look straight and stalwart enough when necessary. He's very dark. A fiercer sun than that which shines on England has burned him into a permanent copper colour, and he has a moustache that Munchausen might have envied. He knocks at the door and asks if Master Reuben Pemberthy can be seen at a moment's notice. The maidservant looks surprised, but says, "Well, my mistress is within, sir." "Reuben Pemberthy's wife, that is," he mutters, pulling thoughtfully at his long moustache. "Ah, well, perhaps she will see me." "Well, what name shall I say, my lord?" "Sir Richard Ishaw, but she will not know the name." He stands in the hall, looking about him critically. His manservant, still mounted, goes slowly back to the roadway with his master's horse and his own, where he remains in waiting. Presently, Sir Richard Ishaw is shown into the great farm parlour, very cool and full of shadow, with great green plants on the broad recesses of the open window, and bees buzzing about them from the outer world. A young woman in deep widow's weeds rises as he enters, and makes him one of those profound curtsies which were considered appropriate for the fair sex to display to those in rank and honour in the good old days when George was king. Surely, a young woman still, despite the 15 years that have passed, with a young and supple figure and a pleasantly unlined face. 18 years and 15 only make 33, and one can scarcely believe in time's inroads looking in upon Sophie Pemberthy. He is surprised, and he looks at her through tears in his dark eyes. "You asked to see Mr. Reuben Pemberthy," she says sadly. "You did not know that—"
No. No, I did not know,"
he says, a little huskily.
"I'm a stranger to these parts. I have been long abroad."
"Might I inquire the nature of your errand, Sir Richard?" she asks in a low voice, "though I'm afraid I cannot be of any service as regards any business of the farm."
"How is that?"
he asks, steadily, keeping gaze upon her. "The farm passes to Mr. Pemberthy's cousin in a few days' time."
"Indeed?
"Then you—" He pauses, halfway for a reply, but it is long in coming. Only the humming of the bees disturb the silence of the room.
And then you leave here? He concludes at last. Yes. It is only the male Pemberthes who rule, she says. Your children. My one little boy, my dear Algy, died before his father. It was great disappointment to my husband that he should die. We female Pemberthes, she says with a sudden, real, bright little smile that settles down into sadness again very quickly. We female Pemberthes do not count for a great deal in the family. How long has Mr. Pemberthy been dead? 6 months. You are left poor? He says very quickly now. I don't think you have the right to ask me such a question, sir. I have no right, he replies. These are foreign manners. Excuse them. Please do not mind me. Still, he is persistent. From son to son's son, and the women left anywhere and anyhow. That is the Pemberthy law, I expect. I've seen the workings of such a law before. Not that I ought to complain, he adds with a forced laugh, a laugh that Mrs. Pemberthy seems suddenly to remember. For I've profited thereby. Indeed, says the farmer's widow, for the want of a better answer at the moment. I am a younger son, but all my brothers have been swept away by wars or pestilence, and I am sent for in hot haste. I, who had shaken the dust of England from my feet for 15 years. 15 years? Almost. Don't you recollect the last time I was in this room? You? In this room? Sir Richard? Yeah. But just try to remember when that was. And how back then I sounded more like this. I talk different now. I look different. I only come back to look at the old place and you, just for once before I go away again. Try and think, Mrs. Pemberthy, as I used to call you. She looks into the red, sunburnt face, starts, blushes, and looks away. Yes, I remember you are... Well? Captain Guy. Yes, that is it. Richard Guy Ishaw, younger son who went wholly to the bad, who turned highwayman, whom you saved. The only one out of the 8. The rest were hanged at Tyburn and Kensington. Poor devils. And I thought I would ride over and thank you, and see you just once more. Your husband would have hanged me, I dare say, but there. Peace to his soul. Amen, whispers Sophie Pemberthy. You saved me. You set me thinking of my young mother who died when I was a lad and loved me much too well, and you taught me that there were warm and loving hearts in the world, and when I went away from here, I went away from the old life. I cannot say how that was, but, shrugging his shoulders, so it was, and it did happen. It was a call, said Sophie, piously. Yeah, call to arms, for I went to the wars. And what it is now that brings me back here to thank you, an old time-worn reprobate turned soldier, and then turned respectable gentleman. What was that? I don't know. Another call. Depend upon it. A call to Maythorpe where I expected to find a fat farmer and his buxom partner and a crowd of laughing boys and girls where I hoped I might be of help to some of them, and if help were indeed needed. And he adds, I find only you, and you just the same fair, bright girl I left behind me long ago. Oh no, it's like a dream. It's very remarkable to me. Yeah. It's another call, Mrs. Pemberthy. Depend upon it. And it is not the last call, either. The estate of Richard Eyeshaw lies not so many miles from the Maythorpe farm that a good long ride cannot overcome the distance between them. And the man turned respectable, the real baronet, is so very much alone and out of place in his big house that he knows not what to do. And Mistress Pemberthy is very much alone too, and going out alone into the world, almost friendless, with only £200 perhaps, and the second best bed as her share of her late loving but rather hard and unsympathetic husband's worldly goods. And folks do say, Finchley way, that pretty Mistress Pemberthy will be Lady Eyeshaw before the winter sets in, and that will be exactly 15 years since these two first set eyes upon each other. This guy was prolific. I'm not sure what year this story takes place in, but it is public domain. And let's just say this story takes place a long, long time ago. Definitely before cell phones, probably before any form of telephones whatsoever. This story is called A Departmental Case by O.Henry. A Departmental Case by O.Henry. One sizzling August afternoon, the commissioner reclined in his office chair with his feet upon the long official table covered with green billiard cloth. The commissioner was smoking a cigar and dreamily regarding the quivering landscape framed by the window that looked upon the treeless Capitol grounds. Perhaps he was thinking of the rough and ready life he had led, of the old days of breathless adventure and movement, of the comrades who now trod other paths or had ceased to tread any, of the changes civilization and peace had brought, and maybe, complacently, of the snug and comfortable camp pitched for him under the dome of the capital of the state that had not forgotten his services. The business of the department was lax. Old Kaufman, the efficient and perpetual clerk, had requested an infrequent half-holiday, incited to the usual dispensation by the joy of having successfully twisted the tail of a Connecticut insurance company that was trying to do business contrary to the edicts of the great Lone Star State. So like Will, this takes place in Texas, y'all. The office was very still. A few subdued noises trickled in through the open door from the other departments. A dull tinkling crash from the treasurer's office adjoining as a clerk tossed a bag of silver to the floor of the vault. The vague, intermittent clatter of a dilatory typewriter, a dull tapping from the state geologist's quarters as if some woodpecker had flown in to bore for his prey in the cool of the massive building, and then a faint rustle and the light shuffling of the well-worn shoes along the hall. The sounds ceasing at the door toward which the commissioner's lethargic back was presented. Following this, the sound of a gentle voice speaking words unintelligible to the commissioner's somewhat dormant comprehension, but giving evidence of bewilderment and hesitation. The voice was feminine. The commissioner was of the kind of cavalier who made a low bow of greeting before the trail of a skirt without considering the quality of its cloth. That's great character development. He'll simply out of chivalry bow to any lady without first addressing how well her gown is made or what class she may belong to. He will simply bow to her upon her entry for no other reason than civility, because this is how you treat a lady. There stood in the door a faded woman, one of the numerous sisterhood of the unhappy. She was dressed all in black, poverty's perpetual mourning for lost joys. Her face had the contours of 20 and the lines of 40. She may have lived that intervening score of years in a 12-month. There was about her yet an aura of indignant, unappeased, protesting youth that shone faintly through the premature veil of unearned decline.
"I beg your pardon, ma'am," said the commissioner, gaining his feet to the accompaniment of a great creaking and sliding of his chair.
Are you the governor, sir?"
asked the vision of melancholy. The commissioner hesitated at the end of his best bow. "Well, no, ma'am, I'm not the governor. I have the honor to be the Commissioner of Insurance, Statistics, and History. Is there anything, ma'am, I can do for you? Won't you have a chair, ma'am?"
The lady subsided into the chair, handed her, probably from purely physical reasons. She wielded a cheap fan, a last token of gentility not yet abandoned. Her clothing seemed to indicate a reduction almost to extreme poverty. She looked at the man, who was not the governor, and saw kindliness and simplicity and a rugged, unadorned courtliness emanating from a countenance tanned and toughened by 40 years of outdoor life. Also, she saw that his eyes were clear and strong and blue. Now, in bearing and dress, Luke Conrad Sandifer endeavored to do credit to the Department of Insurance, Statistics, and History. He had abandoned the careless dress of his country home. Now, his broad-brimmed black slouch hat and his long-tailed frock coat made him not the least imposing of the official family, even if his office was reckoned to stand at the tail of the list.
"You wanted to see the governor, ma'am?" asked the commissioner, with a deferential manner that he always used toward the fair sex.
"I hardly know," said the lady hesitatingly. "I suppose so." And then, suddenly drawn by the sympathetic look of the other, she poured forth the story of her need. It was a story so common that the public has come to look at its monotony instead of at its pity. The old tale of an unhappy married life, made so by a brutal, conscienceless husband, a robber, a spendthrift, a moral coward, and a bully who failed to provide even the means of the barest existence. Don't step on the mixing board, buddy. Thank you. Yes, he... Pause. It was a story so common that the public has come to look at its monotony instead of at its pity. The old tale of an unhappy married life made so by a brutal, conscienceless husband, a robber, a spendthrift, a moral coward, and a bully who failed to provide even the means of the barest existence. Yes, he had come down in the scale so low as to strike her. It happened only the day before. There was the bruise on one temple. She had offended His Highness by asking for a little money to live on, and yet she must make a plea to her tyrant. He was drinking. He had rarely abused her thus when sober. I thought, mourned this pale sister of sorrow, that maybe the state might be willing to give me some relief. I've heard of such things being done for the families of old settlers. I've heard tell that the state used to give land to the men who fought for it against Mexico and settled up the country and helped drive out the Indians. My father did all of that, and he never received anything. He never would take it. I thought the governor would be the one to see, and that's why I came. If father was entitled to anything, they might let it come to me.
It's possible, ma'am, said Standifer, that such might be the case, but most all the veterans and settlers got their land certificates issued and is located long ago. Still, we can look up that land in the land. We can look that up in the land office and be sure. Your father's name now was
Amos Colvin, sir.
Good Lord! Exclaimed Standifer, rising and unbuttoning his tight coat excitedly. Are you Amos Calvin's daughter? Why, ma'am, Amos Calvin and me were thicker than two horse thieves for more than 10 years. We fought enemies, drove cattle, and ranged side by side nearly all over Texas. I remember seeing you once before now. You were a kid, about 7, riding a little yellow pony up and down. Amos and me stopped at your home for a little grub when we were trailing that band of cattle thieves down through Carnison B. Great tarantulas, and you're Amos Calvin's little girl. Did you ever hear your father mention Luke Standifer? Just kind of casually, as if he'd met me once or twice. A little pale smile flitted across the lady's white face.
It seems to me, she said, that I don't remember hearing him talk about much else. Every day there was some story he had to tell about what he and you had done. Mighty near the last thing I heard him tell was about the time he was wounded and you crawled out to him through the grass with a canteen of water while they...
Why, yes. Oh, well, that wasn't anything, said Standifer, hemming loudly and buttoning his coat again briskly. And now, ma'am, who was the infernal skunk? I beg your pardon, ma'am. Who was the gentleman you married?
Benton Sharp.
The commissioner plumped down again into his chair with a groan.
Come on, bud. There you go.
This gentle, sad little woman
in the rusty black gown, the daughter of his oldest friend, the wife of Benton Sharp. Benton Sharp, one of the most noted bad men in that part of the state. A man who had been a cattle thief, an outlaw, a desperado, and was now a gambler, a swaggering bully who plied his trade in the larger frontier towns, relying upon his record and the quickness of his gunplay to maintain his supremacy. Seldom did anyone take the risk of going up against Benton Sharp. Even the law officers were content to let him make his own terms of peace. Sharp was a ready and an accurate shot, and as lucky as a brand new penny at coming clear from his scrapes. Standiford wondered how this pillaging eagle ever came to be mated with Amos Colvin's little dove, and expressed his wonder. Mrs. Sharp sighed. You see, Mr. Standiford, we didn't know anything about him, and he can be very pleasant and kind when he wants to. We lived down in the little town of Goliad. Benson came riding down that way and stopped there a while. I reckon I was some better looking then than I am now. He was good to me for a whole year after we were married. He insured his life for me for $5,000, but for the last 6 months, he's done everything but kill me. I often wish he had done that too. He was out of money for a while and abused me shamefully for not having anything he could spend. Then Father died and left me the little home in Goliad. My husband made me sell that and turned me out into the world. I've barely been able to live, for I'm not strong enough to work. Lately, I heard he was making money in San Antonio, so I went there and found him and asked for a little help. This, touching the livid bruise on her temple, is what he gave me. So, I came on to Austin to see the governor. I once heard Father say that there was some land or a pension coming to him from the state that he would never ask for. Luke Standifer rose to his feet and pushed his chair back. He looked rather perplexedly around the big office with its handsome furniture. It's a long trail to follow, he said slowly, trying to get back dues from the government. There's red tape and lawyers and rulings and evidence and courts to keep you waiting, and I'm not certain, continued the commissioner with a profoundly meditative frown. I'm not certain whether this department that I'm the boss of has any jurisdiction or not. It's only insurance statistics and history, ma'am, and it don't sound as if it would cover the case. But sometimes a saddle blanket can be made to stretch. You keep your seat, just for a few minutes, ma'am, till I step into the next room, and I'll see about it. The state treasurer was seated within his massive, complicated railings, reading a newspaper. Business for the day was about over. The clerks lolled at their desks, awaiting the closing hour. The commissioner of insurance statistics and history entered and leaned in at the window. The treasurer, a little brisk old man with snow-white mustache and beard, jumped up youthfully and came forward to greet Standifer. They were friends of old. Uncle Frank, said the commissioner, using the familiar name by which the historic treasurer was addressed by every Texan. How much money have you got on hand? The treasurer named the sum of the last balance down to the odd cents, something more than $1 million. The commissioner whistled lowly, and his eyes grew hopefully bright. You know, or else you've heard of Amos Colvin, Uncle Frank?
Yeah, knew him well.
said the treasurer, promptly. A good man. Valuable citizen. One of the first settlers in the Southwest. His daughter, said Standifer, is sitting in my office. She's penniless. She's married to Benton Sharp, a coyote and a murderer. He's reduced her to wants and broken her heart. Her father helped build up this state, and it's the state's turn to help this child. A couple of $1,000s will buy back her home and let her live in peace. The state of Texas can't afford to refuse it. So give me the money, Uncle Frank, and I'll give it to her right away. We'll fix up the red tape business afterward. The treasurer looked a little bewildered. Why, Standifer, he said, you know I can't pay a cent out of the treasury without a warrant from the comptroller. I can't disperse $1 without a voucher to show for it. The commissioner betrayed a slight impatience. I'll give you a voucher, he declared. What's this job they've given me for? Am I just a knot on a mesquite stump? Can't my office stand for it? Charge it up to the insurance and the other two sideshows. Don't statistics show that Amos Calvin came to this state when it was in need of civilizing? Don't they show that Amos Colvin's daughter is brought to ruin by a villain who's trying to pull down what you and I and old Texans shed our blood to build up? Don't history show that the Lone Star State never yet failed to grant relief to the suffering and oppressed children of the men who made her the grandest commonwealth in the Union? Well, if statistics and history don't bear out the claim of Amos Colvin's child, I'll ask the next legislature to abolish my office. Come now, Uncle Frank. Let her have the money. I'll sign the papers officially, if you say so, and then if the governor or the comptroller or the janitor or anybody else makes a kick, by the Lord, I'll refer the matter to the people and see if they won't endorse the act. The treasurer looked sympathetic but shocked. The commissioner's voice had grown louder as he rounded off the sentences that, however praiseworthy they might be in sentiment, reflected somewhat upon a more or less important department of state. The clerks were beginning to listen. Now, Standifer, said the treasurer soothingly, you know I'd like to help in this matter, but stop and think a moment, please. Every cent in the treasury is expended only by appropriation made by the legislature and drawn out by checks issued by the comptroller. I can't control the use of a cent of it. Neither can you. Your department isn't dispersive. It isn't even administrative. It's purely clerical. The only way for the lady to obtain relief is to petition the legislature and, to devil with the legislature, said Standifer, turning away. The treasurer called him back. I'd be glad, Standifer, to contribute $100 personally toward the immediate expenses of Colvin's daughter. He reached for his pocketbook. Never mind, Uncle Frank, said the commissioner in a softer tone. There's no need for that. She hasn't asked for anything of that sort yet. Besides, her case is in my hands. I see now what a little ragtag, bob-tailed, gotcha department I've been put in charge of. It seems to be about as important as an almanac or a hotel register. But while I'm running it, it won't turn away any daughters of Amos Colvin without stretching its jurisdiction to cover if possible. You want to keep your eye on the Department of Insurance, Statistics, and History. The commissioner returned to his office, looking thoughtful. He opened and closed an inkstand on his desk, many times with extreme and undue attention.
Why don't you get a divorce? He asked suddenly.
I haven't the money to pay for it,
answered the lady. Just at present, announced the commissioner in a formal tone, the powers of my department appear to be considerably string-halted. Statistics seem to be overdrawn at the bank, and history isn't good for a square meal, but you've come to the right place, ma'am. The department will see you through. Where did you say your husband is, ma'am?
He was in San Antonio yesterday. He's living there now.
Suddenly, the commissioner abandoned his official air. He took the faded little woman's hands in his and spoke in the old voice he used on the trail and around campfires. Your name's Amanda, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
I thought so. I heard your daddy say it often enough. Well, Amanda, here's your father's best friend, the head of a big office in the state government that's going to help you out of your troubles. And here's the old bushwhacker and cowpuncher that your father has helped out of scrapes time and time again wants to ask you a question. Amanda, if you got enough money to run you for the next 2, maybe 3 days. Miss Sharp's white face flushed the least bit.
Plenty, sir, for a few days.
All right then, ma'am. Now, you go back where you were stopping here, and you come to the office again the day after tomorrow at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Very likely by that time, there will be something definite to report to you.
The commissioner hesitated and looked a trifle embarrassed.
You said your husband has insured his life for $5,000. Do you know whether the premiums have been kept paid upon it or not?
He paid for a whole year in advance about 5 months ago, said Mrs. Sharp. I have the policy and receipts in my trunk.
Oh, that's all right then, said Standiford. It's best to look after things of that sort. Someday, they may come in handy. Mrs. Sharp departed, and soon afterward, Luke Standifer went down to the little hotel where he boarded and looked up the railroad timetable in the daily paper. Half an hour later, he removed his coat and vest and strapped a peculiarly constructed pistol holder across his shoulders, leaving the receptacle close under his left armpit. Into the holster, he shoved a short-barreled .44 caliber revolver. Putting on his clothes again, he strolled to the station and caught the 5:20 afternoon train for San Antonio. The San Antonio Express of the following morning contained this sensational piece of news.
Benton Sharp meets his match. The most noted desperado in southwest Texas shot to death in the Gold Front restaurant. Prominent state official successfully defends himself against the noted bully. Magnificent exhibition of quick gunplay.
The article read in further detail.
Last night, about 11 o'clock, Benton Sharp, with 2 other men, entered the Gold Front restaurant and seated themselves at a table. Sharp had been drinking and was loud and boisterous, as he always was when under the influence of liquor. 5 minutes after the party was seated, a tall, well-dressed, elderly gentleman entered the restaurant. Few present recognized the Honorable Luke Standifer, the recently appointed Commissioner of Insurance, Statistics, and History. Going over to the same side where Sharp was, Mr. Standiford prepared to take a seat in the next table. In hanging his hat upon one of the hooks upon the wall, he let it fall upon Sharp's head. Sharp turned, being in an especially ugly humor, and cursed the other roundly. Mr. Standiford apologized calmly for the accident, but Sharp continued his vituperations. Mr. Standiford was observed to draw near and speak a few sentences to the desperado in so low a tone that no one else caught the words. Sharp sprang up, wild with rage. In the meantime, Standiford had stepped some yards away and was standing quietly with his arms folded across the breast of his loosely hanging coat. With that impetuous and deadly rapidity that made Sharp so dreaded, he reached for the gun he always carried in his hip pocket, a movement that has preceded the death of at least a dozen men at his deadly hands. Quick as the motion was, the bystanders assert that it was met by the most beautiful exhibition of a lightning gun-pulling ever witnessed in the Southwest. As Sharp's pistol was being raised, and the act was really quicker than the eye could follow, a glittering .44 appeared as if by some conjuring trick in the right hand of Mr. Standiford, who, without a perceptible moment or movement of his arm, shot Benton Sharp through the heart. It seems that the new Commissioner of Insurance, Statistics, and History has been an old-time ranger for many years, which accounts for the happy knack he has of handling a .44. It is not believed that Mr. Standiford will be put to any inconvenience beyond a necessary formal hearing today, as all the witnesses who were present unite in declaring that the deed was done in self-defense.
When Mrs. Sharp appeared at the office of the commissioner, according to the appointment, she had found that gentleman calmly eating a golden russet apple. He greeted her without embarrassment and without hesitation at the approaching subject that was the topic of the day. "I had to do it, ma'am," he said simply. "Or get it myself." Turning to the old clerk, "Mr. Kaufman, please look up the records of the Security Life Insurance Company and see if they're all right."
No need to look,"
grunted Kaufman, who had everything in his head.
"It's all okay. They pay all losses within 10 days.
Mrs. Sharp soon rose to depart. She had arranged to remain in town until the policy was paid. The commissioner did not detain her. She was a woman, and he did not know just what to say to her at present. Rest and time would bring her what she needed. But as she was leaving, Luke Standiford indulged himself in an official remark. "The Department of Insurance, Statistics, and History, ma'am, has done the best it could with your case. It was a hard case to cover, according to red tape. Statistics failed, and history misfired. But, if I may be permitted to say it, we came out particularly strong on insurance." Yeah. O.Henry. O.Henry, O.Henry, O.Henry. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Fireside Tales with Wolfgang. To view more of my work, check out my YouTube channel at Hunter's Acoustic Cabin. Directed by Hunter Ackerman. Endorsed by Wolfgang Beastly. Produced by GWC Productions. Originally broadcast on GWC Productions' YouTube channel, CAPS Media Television Channel 6, KPPQ LP Ventura at 104.1 FM, and on the KPPQ Podcast Network.